Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. Our guest today is Vishnu Varathan, Head of Economics and Strategy from Mizuho Bank, coming on out of Singapore. Now, Vishnu, as always, great to have you on the show this Monday
Good morning.
afternoon,
Good morning,
rather.
Brian. It's always good to be here on a Monday afternoon, and make no mistake, even the morning would have been good.
Now, before we start and get your insights, Vishnu, we will go and find out how crypto markets are performing. We've got Bitcoin, which is at 65,732.8. It's up 1.53%. Ethereum is at 4,699.96. It is up 1.44%. Now, if we look across to regional markets, we start with the close to home with the SGX, which is at 3,234.84. It's up 0.2%. Now, if we look at across other markets in the region, we've got the ASX 200 All Ordinaries, which is at 7,791.1. It's up 0.33%. The Hang Seng is at 25,257.5. It's down 0.28%. The Kospi is at 3,001.14. It is up 1.09%. The Nikkei is at 29,738.5. It's up 0.43%. The Shanghai Composite is at 3,528.88. It's down 0.29%. And rounding up the numbers, we've got the KLCI, which is at 1,523.6. It's down 0.5%. Now, what's your view on how markets have performed this morning?
I think markets have got a lot to think about today, Brian. As we're starting off the Monday and we're coming from a short week for the US. What's happening in the markets is markets are looking at soft US University of Michigan data. So that, I think, weighs a little bit. And this morning, we've had China data come up. And China data has been very, very mixed. Whilst in the headlines, it looks like there's been a recovery and a bounce back, actually, the underlying growth remains pretty weak. And so that gives a lot of food for thought. And that's only on retail sales and IP. Fixed asset investments, including property market investments, confirm our concerns that there's been a sharper slowdown on that front. So these factors put together are giving markets a little bit of a pause to think about what policy might be doing in response to high inflation, yet with growth risks still in place.
Okay, just to recap, I'm going to read out some numbers to basically confirm what you've just said. So in terms of the retail numbers out of China, it grew by 4.9%. It did beat a Reuters poll that forecast a 3.5% growth. Industrial production beat expectations. It was up 3.5% year on year in October. Reuters predicted a 3%. So in your view, despite those better than expected numbers, the underlying numbers are not good.
Yes, to sum it up, it's really so to sum it up, I think it's really hollow consolation, mainly because if we look at the underlying numbers, that's to say we take away the distortions of the base effects from last year's numbers. The underlying momentum continues to be weak, and there is no emphatic or convincing acceleration. So concerns about China data remain, and not just because of the data today, depending on the interpretation, but rather we are also mindful of the fact that there's been a COVID outbreak. China is, doubling down on its zero COVID policy. It's also got a power crunch that's yet to be solved heading to winter. All these point towards a very bumpy recovery, if there's any discernible recovery over the next few months.
Okay, the other data which is also worrying that has come out of Japan is their GDP numbers, which declined at an annualized of 3% in the July to September quarter. Now that is far worse than the median market forecast of a 0.8 correction, according to a Reuters poll. What's your view out of Japan in terms of their growth and their growth expectations moving forward?
I think first things first. Japan is definitely lagging in the G3 in terms of the recovery, primarily because they've been slower to get out of COVID with the vaccinations, so on and so forth. Then the second point is this validates and underpins the BOJ's views that they are far from where they're nowhere near policy normalization. They're going to be the last one to think about an exit policy or normalization. So that's the total coherence there. The silver lining, though, is that the COVID trends, as we've come in recent weeks and months, is that Q4 is turning a lot better for Japan, but it doesn't distract us from the bottom line, which is policy in Japan will probably remain more unambiguously and more convincingly accommodative than it might for the US.
Now, I want to also swing our attention to something that markets are looking forward to for the last few weeks, the China-US virtual summit, so to speak. The conversation between presidents, the two powers that be, Xi and Biden. What is the market expectations from this dialogue?
Well, the summit is virtual, the problems are real, and the resolution is difficult. So I think what we're going to expect is whether the low bars are cleared, whether there's some agreement on whether, we can get a consensus on whether there's been some progress on China meeting the phase one deal. That's one aspect of it. I think there will be at best an agreement to disagree on Taiwan. I don't think either party is going to concede enough ground for geopolitical watchers to say a heave of relief or to dismiss Taiwan risks. So there will be issues that are going to be very hard topics. I think both parties may not budge very much, but the outcome of the summit is they are probably going to emphasize on the common ground they have found, and I think these will be around cooperation and progress towards common trade goals. These are, of course, work in progress, and that's what I think markets will take away at the end of the day.
And Vishnu, since the beginning of the week, what are key data points and events that we should look out for during this week that will move markets?
So interestingly for us, we've had 30-year high US inflation last week, followed by a drop in University of Michigan sentiments to below the COVID lows. Against that backdrop, the US retail sales number this week becomes very important because markets want to assess whether consumers are affected by the high inflation and hence in real terms spending less, or even worse, whether consumers are actually pulling back to save for a rainy day, because we have not had any precedent of coming of a pandemic and consumer spending in those instances, particularly with the distortion of fairly cash-rich consumers because of the fiscal boost. So these are the big unknowns, and this is how we need to square the difference between high inflation and low confidence and what it results in, and that's actually the show me the money moment in markets for the week. We also, after Japan's GDP, we've got European GDP numbers coming out, so we wondered how this may really be an in-between case of the US and Japan, if you might, in terms of the
Sorry, Vishnu, we've lost you.
momentum. Yep. And so for the rest of the week, markets will be we'll be focusing on Bank Indonesia and the Philippines Central Bank to see where they converge on policy. Widely expected for, we really want to see the inflation.
Sorry, Vishnu, we've lost you. Vishnu, we lost you after Indonesia. I think Bank of Indonesia.
Oh, right. Sorry. So, hope back on. And so Bank of Indonesia and the Philippines, while the is for two central banks to remain on hold, I think what Mark was the communication on inflation, and that's becoming the big bugbear for a lot of the central.
Okay. Vishnu, thank you very much for your insights. I think we've really got a bad connection. Now, we've been speaking to Vishnu Varathan, Head of Economics and Strategy from Mizuho Bank, coming out of Singapore on BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. I'm Brian Fernandez. Please check out our video and podcasts on various platforms, as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please like and subscribe to our various social media platforms. Thank you very much for tuning in.